So you're a beginner flight simmer and just getting into it, and you're wondering what's the best setup to get you off the ground. Well, you're watching the right video. In this review of the Velocity One flight yoke, I'm going to cover the good and the bad, but most importantly, why this could be the right yoke for you. Priced at $388 US, it's not what I'd call cheap, but it does somewhat back up its price with features. And I'm going to go through them first, and then we'll get into the build quality and the kind of value aspect. This yoke has mounting points on the bottom with M6 screws, so you can screw it down to a rig, or you can use what I will call one of the best mounting clamp solutions of any consumer grade yoke. So you have the yoke wheel, handle, whatever you want to call it. It's going to give you a full 90 degrees of deflection either way, and that's important as that mimics what you'll get in a real aircraft. The wheel itself is fairly large in a good way. You have the rudder controls on the yoke handle, not the traditional way of controlling the rudder, but this is an all-in-one solution, so it's an important addition. It comes with a throttle quadrant that gets attached. It snaps quickly into the side and connects via a second pass-through USB-C. Now, an important note is that the throttle quadrant will not work standalone. It needs to be connected to the main base for it to show up in the sim. Now, the throttle quadrant is a great addition to this yoke, but it does have a weak point, which I'll get to in the build quality section. Now, attached to the throttle quadrant, there is also a small configurable button box. Extremely useful, and again, plays on that all-in-one solution, which is super handy. Then there's the trim wheel. If you're just starting out, you may not know what a trim wheel is, but believe me when I say it, it's one of the most essential and engaging parts of this yoke. Further details on that coming up. Some of the other standard things like POV and hat switches, an annunciator panel, basic flight management display, like this yoke is an all-in-one solution, and when you couple that with being more or less plug and play on PC and full Xbox compatibility with Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's very hard to look past it. So let's move on to the design and build quality. Now, this is where things start to get, let's say, a little hazy. It's brilliant in some parts, not so good in others. Let me explain. The yoke handle or wheel and the base structure of the whole unit is very good, and really good for the price in my opinion. The buttons on the yoke and the hat switches are kind of what you would expect, comparable to, say, a standard Xbox controller. The desk mounting option is very neat, and it mounts super stable when mounted to a desk. It might even be the best desk mount I've seen in any consumer grade yoke. Previously I mentioned the yoke has 90 degrees of deflection and 90 millimeters of travel for pitch, which is kind of what you would expect. The feel of the yoke and the roll is really great. You know, it's super smooth. It's got a little bit of a detent though. I mean, it's not a massive issue, but the same can't be said about the pitch axis, which is moving in and out. Here, there's quite a pronounced detent, and if you have any weight on the yoke when pulling back or forth, you'll notice like a slight sticking effect. Now, if you're using two hands on the yoke and not resting your weight on it, you're unlikely to feel it. However, if you're using the yoke with one hand, which you will be most of the time, that kind of off-center pressure can cause the stickiness to be more prevalent. There's also a slight amount of play where the yoke wheel meets the shaft. To be honest, it's not much and barely worth mentioning. Now, Turtle Beach did say that the stickiness will disappear in time, and I've heard other YouTube reviewers say the exact same thing. In my experience though, it's not quite the case. Yes, it does lessen, but for me, you know, it doesn't disappear. Is it a deal breaker though? No, it's not. You just need to be aware of it. Now, the trim wheel. Now, we did mention this as a real highlight earlier. This is probably the best trim wheel you're ever likely to feel in a consumer grade yoke product, and in any yoke product for that matter. It really is. It's super smooth with a very, very, very nice weight to it. Turtle Beach knocked the trim wheel out of the park. Now let's go over the build quality of the throttle quadrant. Now there's good and bad here. The throttle connects to the main yoke using USB-C like we talked about earlier. It's got 4 levers for a commercial or GA style setup on top. And more importantly, the vernier style controls for simple single engine aircraft. This is extremely important in my book. If you're a beginner, you're likely going to be flying smaller planes and learning about blade pitch, mixture and throttle. The setup here in the throttle quadrant is a beginner's dream in that sense, but it's not all popcorn and twizzle sticks. Where the vernier controls do feel quite nice to use, the levers on top are just too light. They need more resistance. There are a few workarounds for this though. I've seen some people put strips of felt along the insides. This seems to work quite well. It's got a semi-useful flight management display. You can do things like load different profiles, change the colour of the LEDs. I never really found myself using it all that much, but you know, it's a nice addition. Earlier I did mention the button box, which is super handy and completely configurable, but the quality of the buttons aren't on par with the rest of the yoke. They just need more travel. They kind of feel like a little bit of a cheap afterthought, but it's also a brilliant addition at the same time. So why is this yoke the right choice for beginners? I'm going to flow through this with more or less kind of dot points, but I'll start off by saying as a beginner flight simmer, you might be on Xbox or PC. And if you do start on an Xbox, which many of you will, and you love flight sim and you get right into it, then I guarantee you will eventually move to PC just for the sheer depth of content available. And with this yoke, you can do that. You know, you can progress onto PC to have a much deeper experience. You have all the controls you need to fly any GA plane manually. You learn about pitch, trim and mixture control. Look, this yoke may not be your forever yoke, but as you progress, it will take you a hell of a long way. It's plug and play, zero frustration setup. Makes the initial process of getting into Flight Simulator so much better. You can authentically fly almost any plane, more or less, in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The build quality is very good for the price. The only cons you need to be aware of is the slight stickiness of the rod when adjusting the pitch and the heavy pitch detent. Look, when it's this easy to use, mount and get up and running, your first experience of flight sim is going to be really good. If you're new to flight sim or are coming from a controller, then any of these bad points I mentioned are almost irrelevant. You really won't know any different. The only reason I bring these up is I've got quite a lot of experience with a variety of yokes from entry level to high end, so I've just got a fuller picture. Now I want to quickly talk about your other yoke options. The only one that was going to kind of come close is the Thrustmaster TCA yoke pack at around $430. It does come in around $100 more expensive with, I make a point of saying this, less functionality. The yoke also has a pendulum style, which is best suited for flying the big Boeing jets. The only time I'd recommend this yoke over the Turtle Beach for beginners is if that you're dead certain all you want to do is fly Boeing jets, then 100%, you know, that's the yoke that you should get. Do not buy the Turtle Beach, buy the Thrustmaster. You could also go for the Logitech option. It is on the cheaper side, but in my opinion, you're not going to have a good experience with it and you'll soon outgrow it. Flight sim peripherals have moved on since this was first introduced. Great in its day, but it's no longer anywhere near these other two that I mentioned. There is also the honeycomb option, but it's just not comparable in price. I think it's actually around double the price, if not more, and it really is the next step up. It's clearly in that enthusiast range. The value aspect for the beginner flight simmer, you know, the Turtle Beach Velocity One hits a real sweet spot. An all-in-one yoke, throttle and rudder system with good build quality and easy to use and set up. It will really help you get started in flight sim, which can be overwhelming and confusing at times for new people. Turtle Beach have addressed this with this product, which is why I always recommend the Turtle Beach Velocity One Yoke to someone that's starting out their flight sim journey and really wants to start with a yoke. It's a yoke you can get your feet wet with, but most importantly, you can progress with it. And it doesn't break the bank either.